Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my game week preview ahead of game week 35. We only have 4 game weeks left now. We really are at the business end of the season, and as always I will do my best to answer all of your dilemmas, discussion points and questions to the best of my ability. If you're enjoying the content here on this channel, please do remember to like, comment and subscribe. But without further ado, let's jump into today's video. So guys, before we jump into today's video, I just want to give a massive shout out to Ultimate Champions. As I said in the previous video, Ultimate Champions is finally live. So please click the first link in the description. It's completely free to play. You don't even have to download it. It's just on your web browser. Go give Ultimate Champions a go. It's basically a combination between like fantasy football, trading cards and FIFA. You open packs or at the start of the game, build the best possible draft you can. Once you've built that initial team, the better that team does in real life, as with fantasy football, the better the rewards you can earn. That is via packs, potentially some tokens as well. You can then open packs, trade on the marketplace and build the best possible team, and then you can actually trade and sell those cards for real life cash too. So it's possibility to build a really cool team and also earn some potential cash as well. If you'd like to play Ultimate Champions, like I said, first link in the description will take you there. Completely free. It massively helps support the channel, and also I really like the game as well, and I will be playing it throughout the coming seasons too. Thanks to Ultimate Champions. Let's jump into game week 35. So guys, as always, I asked your questions over on Twitter. There weren't actually that many different questions. There was repetition of a lot of the same questions and the same talking points. So we're going to cover only about 4 or 5 key discussions today, but we're going to do so, as always, with quite a lot of detail and some statistics and underlying data to back that up. So there were a lot of questions around Aston Villa, and rightly so. They performed fairly well against Leicester in game week 34. They've then got Norwich this week in game week 35, and then they've got the double-double. Burnley, Liverpool in 36, Crystal Palace and Burnley both at home in game week 37. And I definitely think that, assuming that the Manchester City fixture goes into game week 36, which at the time of recording this, I still don't know, but we're assuming it will go into 36. I think the Crystal Palace are probably the best, I should say Aston Villa are probably the best captaincy shouts for game week 37, potentially alongside Crystal Palace. But for me, I would potentially be looking at an Aston Villa attacker for game week 37 captaincy. So what I thought I'd do today, as we did with the last game week preview video, is I'm going to look at Aston Villa across the entire season. And once we've done that, I'm then going to look at the Aston Villa assets across the last 6 game weeks. Hopefully doing both of these things will let you know how they've performed across the entire season with a larger sample size, which tends to be more accurate, but also starting to pay attention to some subtle changes over the recent weeks and to see who is in form. I don't like using the word too often, but that does sometimes help. So what I've done is I've chosen 3 defenders here and 3 attackers. They do have some other options in their attack and in their defense, but for me, these are probably the top 6 options. In defense, we've got the 2 fullbacks. We've got Ashley Young and Matty Cash. Of course, Luca Dean is currently injured. It looks like he won't be back fit this season, so they should be the starting fullbacks at right back and left back. And then I've got Mings ahead of Konsa. The reason for that is Mings' underlying data is better than Konsa's, both across the last 6 and across the season as well. And as a result, if you're going to go for one of the centre backs, I would probably go with Mings. And then for the 3 attackers, as you would expect, it's Ramsey, Coutinho and Watkins. The reason for not going for any of the others, such as Bailey or Buendia or Danny Ings, not because they don't have good data, but just they're not very nailed. And I think those 3 in particular will continue to rotate. Whereas I think, anyway, Coutinho and Watkins and Ramsey are probably the 3 most nailed on attackers. So putting all of that together, as per the previous videos, we've got minutes per expected goals conceded / expected goals for the team. This gives you a bit of an idea about how the team's performing. We've then got minutes per expected goal involvement, which gives you a bit of an idea about how many minutes it takes that player to accumulate an expected goal involvement. So we want that number to be as low as possible, preferably. We've then got projected points as per FPL review, and then we've got my Raptor ranking, which is basically where I would rank them with respect to Aston Villa assets. So as you can see, across the season, Aston Villa's defensive data has been incredibly strong. So they are currently the 6th best defence in the league across the season for defensive data for minutes per expected goal conceded. Currently sat at 70.9. So this would actually suggest that targeting the Aston Villa defence probably isn't the worst idea. And they did keep a clean sheet against a fairly decent Leicester attack in game week 34, although the team was obviously slightly rotated there. And then you can see that their attack has actually been pretty poor across the season. So they're the 14th best attack when we're looking at minutes per expected goals. So basically, to summarise that, they're a pretty good defence over the season, actually a top 6 side. But with respect to attack, they're bottom half of the table, around sort of mid-table. So this would suggest maybe target their defence. When we're looking at minutes per expected goal involvement, starting with the defenders, Cash is definitely the one coming out on top at 572.2. Just to give you a comparison as to other defenders around that price, that's very similar to that of Aymeric Laporte. So if you're looking at a sort of defender that puts up around those sort of statistics, similar to Laporte, similar to Rudiger. So he's showing some decent attacking threat, especially for 5.2 million. Mings then at 803. Again, that is starting to get pretty low there. You don't really want a defender. That's suggesting that he's only going to get an expected goal involvement every 800 minutes, which again isn't ideal. And then Ashley Young at 1,289. So again, looking at attacking data, Matty Cash, you probably don't need to tell you this, Matty Cash is probably the defender to go for here. When we're looking at the three other attackers, it's actually Coutinho who's coming out just about on top at 200 minutes, on the dot, 200 minutes per expected goal involvement. Watkins is only slightly lower, actually, so we've got this sort of narrative that Coutinho is definitely the one to go for, putting up much better underlying data. But when we're looking at minutes per expected goal involvement, Watkins is only a little bit lower than Coutinho at 220 minutes. And then we've got Ramsey at a very respectable, for 4.7 minutes, very respectable 367.3. So I think they're all fantastic options here, but this would suggest that Coutinho is just about coming out on top. The only thing that I would note straight away is that, of course, Watkins is a striker. There are so many good midfielders that we can have, potentially in place of Coutinho, but there really aren't that many good strikers, so that might make you lean towards Watkins. With respect to projected minutes from FPL Review, Coutinho and Watkins very, very similar, sat at about 22.5 projected points over the final 4 game weeks. Outside of that, Cash is currently coming in at 3rd, and then you've got Mings and Ramsey very, very close in 4th and 5th, and then Young a little bit lower. That's just because his expected minutes are actually a little bit lower as well. So putting all this together across the season, Coutinho is probably just about the one to own, but when you do take into account positioning, I actually think I might just about prefer Watkins, but I've tried to just look at the assets as they are rather than take into account position. I do think Coutinho is the one to own, but like I said, because Watkins is a striker and there aren't many good strikers, I do really like Ollie Watkins. And then we've got probably Cash coming in at 3rd. So if I were to choose 3 now, if I wanted to load up on 3, and again, you probably didn't need me to tell you this, it probably would be Coutinho, Watkins, and Cash. Outside of that, though, I do think Ramsey is a great option, and if you can't quite stretch to Cash, I'd probably just go for Mings as opposed to Young. Now, though, if we look at the data across the last 6, this data does switch. So remember this data across the season. Let's switch to looking at the last 6 data for Aston Villa now. With respect to their team data, defensively, still really solid. So across the season, they're the 6th best defense. Across the last 6 matches, they're the 5th best defense. So this again is reinforcing the point that Matty Cash is probably a fantastic buy, whether you're wildcarding this week or using your free transfers. Mings and Young will, of course, cover the clean sheet as well. But when you look at the attacking data, Cash probably looks like the one to own. Where there has been a slight change here is in the last 6, Coutinho has actually dropped off slightly. So I spoke to an Aston Villa fan recently, and they said that Coutinho is actually playing a little bit wider than he was when he first came to Aston Villa. That is something to monitor, to keep an eye on. Of course, there can be subtle changes across small sort of sample sizes, and then that can suddenly fluctuate again. So I would prefer to look across a larger sample size. But if he is playing slightly wider, and that's going to decrease his output, as we can see here, maybe Coutinho isn't the best option from Aston Villa. And what we can actually see here is Watkins has shown a little bit of an increase, fairly consistent, around that 200 minutes mark, but he's gone under 200 minutes per expected goal involvement here. So this would suggest that maybe Watkins is the one, again, when you do take into account positioning. And the other thing to note is that Ramsey's is slightly better here, and it's actually quite comparable to Coutinho. So considering the massive gap between their 2 prices here, you might say that Ramsey's potentially the one to own here. It might be worth just downgrading all the way to Ramsey and then using the funds elsewhere. I do think that Coutinho is still the one to own. And Coutinho's data is still better here. And as you can see by the projected points, FPL Review still favours Coutinho, and he is fairly nailed in that team. So I would probably just about lean towards Coutinho. But for me, I currently own Watkins and Cash, so you might think there's a little bit of bias here. But when you look at their minutes per expected goal involvement across the last 6 across the season, when you look at their projected points as well, I actually think Watkins and Cash are 2 pretty good owns. Cash for the defence, Watkins because there aren't many good strikers at the moment. I would love to get Coutinho in, and I'll be completely honest, I'll be very surprised if Coutinho isn't in my team and potentially even my captain for game week 37, just because we've seen how explosive he can be, especially with midfielders getting the extra points for goals, extra points for clean sheets. They have to do a lot less than strikers to get those mega hauls. Watkins would have to score, as we saw with Gabriel Jesus, he had to get, I think it was 5 attacking returns in the end to get 24 points, whereas we saw with Salah, you could get that in 3 or 4 attacking returns with clean sheet points, etc., and more points for goals. So I still think Coutinho is a great own. I'll probably own Coutinho at least for 37, maybe even get for game week 36. But I think you're fine. If you already own Watkins and or Cash, I think you've probably got that covered. All of this to say, though, I definitely think Aston Villa players are worth targeting. As you can see, their data across the season, defensively and in the last 6, fantastic. Across the last 6, their attacking data has increased slightly. They're about mid-table. And I don't buy the narrative that they've got nothing to play for. I think Gerrard will want to finish as high as possible. If they lost every game, they could potentially, I think, still be relegated. But realistically, if they lose quite a few games, they might finish 14th, 15th. And I don't think Gerrard would want that. So whilst they don't have European football to play for, and whilst they're very unlikely to be relegated, I think Gerrard will continue to put out a strong Aston Villa team. And this data would suggest that they might continue to perform fairly well. So I think you're fine not tripling up on Villa. But I would try and get at least one of their assets in. And for me, the 3 to own are Coutinho, Watkins, and Cash. If you can't afford Coutinho or you just want to downgrade, recent data would suggest that downgrading to Ramsey might be worth the money you can save. Let me know down below, how many Aston Villa players do you already own? Which players are they? And which players are you potentially looking at bringing in? Always interested to hear your comments. So outside of Aston Villa, I think probably the most asked question was around Eddie Nketiah. Is Nketiah nailed? Is Nketiah the best budget option? Should we go for Nketiah? Is Lacazette going to get his place back? I'll start by saying, as always, this is my opinion. I can't predict the future. And even if we could accurately predict the future, anything could happen in football anyway. So I'll give you my opinion on this. And the short of it is, yes, I think Nketiah is probably nailed. And yes, his underlying statistics suggest that he is a fantastic option. However, 2 important points. Number 1, Lacazette could still play despite saying he wants to leave, despite falling out of Arteta. He could still play. Also, we could see Martinelli up top with Smith Rowe out wide. And the second thing is, it's a very small sample size that we've got to go off when we're looking at his underlying statistics. He's only played 416 minutes. Having said all that, let's have a look at the fixtures. Let's have a look at the underlying data. So the fixtures are fantastic. And I do want to, wildcarding in 34. I don't currently own any Arsenal players. Looking at this, I probably do want to own at least one. It might not be this week. It will probably be in game week 37. And even if it's not in 36, looking at 37 onwards, I still think they're good owns. So I do think it's worth holding on to your Arsenal players if you've got them. And if you don't own any, I think it is probably worth looking at bringing them in if you have free transfers to use. West Ham look slightly shaky at the back at the moment. Looks like they're prioritising completely the Conference League. Also, at the time of recording this, they've got no fit centre-backs available to play in the league. Of course, like most of their centre-backs are currently injured. Dawson got sent off. Looking at their team, it looks like they're going to have to play a youngster in the centre-back role from the academy, alongside maybe Cresswell and Johnson in a back 3. It's going to be an absolute mess, and Arsenal's data is pretty good over the last 6 and again across the season as well. So I'm looking at this and thinking, yeah, this could be a bit of a massacre. That being said, Moyes creates very system-based teams, I should say. And I think West Ham aren't the sort of team that will just roll over and get battered 4-5, 6-0. So yes, I expect Arsenal to win. Yes, I expect Arsenal to score 2, maybe 3 goals. I don't expect it to be a complete massacre just because of how good Moyes is at blocking those sort of massacre results. All of that being said, the fixtures outside of that are pretty good. If we look at the underlying statistics, expected FPL points for his 416 minutes per 90 is 7.49, which is remarkably good for a striker. Remember, they don't get the extra point for an expected clean sheet. They don't get the extra point for an expected goal. So 7.49 puts him above most strikers in the game this season. His non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 is 0.76, which is absolutely outstanding. Once again, the thing I would keep driving home is that this is a very small sample size, but regardless, that is still incredibly good. Big chances per 90, 0.87. Touches in the box, almost 8 touches in the box per 90. If he were putting up these statistics across maybe 1,000 minutes, 1,200 minutes, I would be saying he's essential in our teams at 5.5 million. The issue we've got is we don't know he's 100% nailed, and it is a very small sample size. We've seen this season remarkable underlying statistics across small sample sizes. I always use the same example of Conor Gallagher early on in the season. Conor Gallagher at one point this season was putting up an expected goal involvement per 90 of 1.05 across a very similar sort of 400-500 minute sample size. He was putting up some of the best underlying data in the league. At one point, it was higher than both Antonio and Salah, who were the 2 best in the league at that time. And then it's dropped off dramatically. Like, he's not even one of the best midfielders in the league now. So it could be that Nketiah is an exceptional striker and he continues to put up these numbers and he absolutely demolishes that price tag. And by the end of the season, he's 6.2 million and we should have all owned him. Or we could see it slightly drop off to about what you would expect for that price of about a 0.3, 0.4 non-penalty expected goal involvement. I don't know the answer to this. All I can present to you is saying that I think he should be fairly nailed because of the situation with Lacazette and the fact that Nketiah is the only recognised striker that they have. It seems silly to me to play Martinelli out of position, to then play Smith Rowe on the left, to then drop Nketiah to the bench. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think the team functions very well with a natural number 9, and Nketiah has been playing very well. So yes, in my opinion, Nketiah should be nailed to start at least 4 of those final 5 games, potentially all 5. And yes, the underlying statistics are absolutely fantastic. Whether he continues to start and whether those underlying statistics continue to stay at that elite level, I don't personally know. Let me know down below what you think of Nketiah. I personally think, bringing that all together, he is probably a buy. If I had a free transfer or if I were wildcarding this week, I'd probably buy him. If he starts West Ham and looks good once again, I will almost definitely be bringing Nketiah in game week 36, and he will be part of my bench boost, and then I'll probably hold him for the remainder of the season, as we spoke about in my game week 34 team selection video. But let me know down below, what do you think of Nketiah? Are there any other budget strikers you want, or do you think he's the best option at 5.5 million? Right, let's discuss captaincy. Lots of questions around captaincy. For the first time in a while, actually, people stopped asking questions around captaincy, but we had quite a few this week, mainly around, is it essential that we captain Son and Kane? If we don't own them, do we desperately need to bring them in for captaincy? Are there other options? Just as a little teaser, no, I don't think they're essential. Yes, I do think there are other options outside Son and Kane, but of course, as you would expect, I do still think they are two of the best options for this upcoming game week. I've got the 10 best captaincy options in my opinion. There are other options in and around these, but for different reasons, whether it be because they're a massive rotation risk or not many people own them. For example, I think Sterling, despite not scoring or assisting in the 5-1 Man City victory in game week 34, I still think Sterling's a good, decent option for game week 35 because he only played for about 6 or 7 minutes in the Champions League on Tuesday night. I still think he's a good option, but not many people own him. And again, Manchester City attackers are a bit of a rotation risk, and I think there are enough options that are fairly nailed on this list here that I would probably go for above and beyond those Man City midfielders and attackers. With respect to the column headings, you can see I've got projected points. This is for game week 35 only as per FPL review. We've then got minutes per expected goal involvement and non-penalty expected goals per 90. These are good to use alongside each other. Minutes per expected goal involvement, like I said, we want that number to be as low as possible. That tells you how long it takes for them to accumulate an expected goal involvement. Minutes non-penalty XG per 90 removes penalties from the equation. So for example, Saka has had 2 penalties in the last 6 game weeks. This removes those 2 penalties and tells you what their open play goal threat has been like. We've then got opposition minutes per XG team, the next one along. That basically tells you how good the defense has been of the team that attacker is playing against. So for example, for Saka, that tells us how good West Ham's defense has been. So they concede an expected goal every 50.1 minutes, which puts West Ham as the 16th best defense in the league over the last 6 matches. So essentially, West Ham have not been very good from a defensive standpoint. Then we've got fixture difficulty according to the Fantasy Football Scout season ticker just for game week 35. Then finally, we've got the Raptor ranking. This is a bit of statistics, but also just in my opinion, off the cuff, who do I think are the best captaincy options from 1st to 10th? So putting that all together, I'm not going to go through each player in massive detail. I'm just going to highlight some of the key details for me. Saka, starting with Saka. If you own Saka, even if he's out for this week, I would potentially be looking to hold on to him. And if he is granted as fit, if he's deemed fit for game week 35 by Arteta in the press conference, and we know 100% that he's going to play, I do think he's a good captaincy shout. As we spoke about, West Ham don't have a fit senior centre-back in their team for this fixture. They'll probably be playing very defensively, so we might not expect to see 6-7 goals for Arsenal, but I would expect them to score a few. I would expect them to dominate this match. And like I said, if he is fit, I think he could have a lot of fun against that West Ham defence. So keep an eye on it. Like I said, I wouldn't sell him if you own him unless he's confirmed out for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. With respect to Coutinho, like we spoke about, Coutinho's underlying data is not very good, but the fixture is amazing. So Norwich are by far and away the worst defence in the league over the entire season and also across the last 6 as well. 44.2 minutes per expected goal conceded. That puts them bottom of the league. If you're going to target a fixture, this is the fixture to target. But the issue is, like I said, Coutinho's data has not been great. Maybe you go for an Ollie Watkins if you want to. I'm not sure that I trust Villa enough. I'm not sure that I trust these underlying statistics enough. When you have Kane, De Bruyne, Son, Salah, etc. as other options, I think it's probably smarter to go for a slightly safer pick. But if you do really want to attack the fixture, it's got to be Aston Villa versus Norwich. You've then got Cancelo in here. He's the only defender that I've listed here, and maybe slightly biased because I'm actually at the moment captaining Cancelo. So a little caveat, he's currently got my armband. I don't own Son and Kane. I don't own De Bruyne, so I don't own some of these options on this list. I just think he's a really good shout. They don't have any other fit fullbacks, really. Stones went off injured in the Champions League. Zinchenko's only obviously just come back from injury. Walker is struggling with a knock as well. And Cancelo got a full rest in the Champions League as well due to suspension. So I think there's a very... I would go as far as saying he's 100% nailed for game week 35. I don't like saying that, but he's fairly nailed. He obviously has a very, very, very good chance for clean sheet, as he always does. Leeds' attacking data hasn't been amazing, although not too bad. But City's defensive data is outrageously good. Yes, they conceded against Watford. They can concede, but I still think that's a fairly decent chance for a clean sheet. And then his attacking data, like I said, it's actually close to Coutinho for non-pen expected goals per 90 over the last 6 weeks. With respect to the fixture, I think it's a decent fixture for attacking returns. Again, Leeds have been slightly better defensively recently, but they're still not a great defence. So I actually think if you're going to go for a defender, I think Cancelo is probably the one to go for. And he's got my armband at the moment. That's a real outside punt, though. And as you can see, he's currently got, I think he's the 5th best captaincy option on this list. So if I'm going for pure analytics, if I'm making a logical decision, he's probably not the best captaincy shout, but I do like it as a slightly riskier punt if you're trying to make up that rank in the back end of the season. You've then got the 3 Chelsea boys. I'm not going to cover them in a lot of detail because we did last week, and really it comes down to who plays against United and how many minutes do they play. Obviously, Havertz just got a rest. Werner and Mount haven't rested a lot recently at all. So if Werner and Mount start against Manchester United and play a fair amount of minutes, I wouldn't feel comfortable captaining either. If Havertz plays again and comes off slightly early again, I'd maybe feel slightly more confident that he starts because he's just had a rest. But I guess unless any of these start from the bench and don't get that many minutes, I would feel slightly uncomfortable captaining any of them, just because, of course, they have the domestic competition coming up, the FA Cup final after game week 36 as well. Yes, they're out of the Champions League, but I would still feel slightly uncomfortable captaining any of them when there are other good options. That being said, they're actually putting up some of the best data in the league with respect to players. So Havertz and Werner have the 2nd and 3rd best data in the league for non-pen expected goals per 90 over the last 6. So if you are confident that Havertz and Werner are going to start, I would put these as some of the best options on this list here. I'm just not confident enough. But do let me know down below if you think any of these are going to start. Like I said, once we see the Manchester United team and how well they play in that fixture, I think we'll have a better idea. We've then got the 4 premiums after that. We've got Son, De Bruyne, Kane and Salah. As you can see, out of these 4, Son, De Bruyne and Kane have almost got identical non-penalty expected goals per 90 across the last 6. So 0.61, 0.63, 0.63. So there's not much to separate them at all. Even minutes per expected goal involvement, all between 140 and 150 minutes per XGI. So Son, De Bruyne and Kane, if you're looking at pure underlying data for them, absolutely nothing to separate the 3 of them. When we're looking at the fixture, slightly better for Son and Kane. But what I just wanted to draw your attention to is that Leicester aren't the worst defence in the league here. West Ham are a worse defence over the last 6. Norwich are a worse defence over the last 6. Everton are very, very close for the Chelsea fixture. Even Leeds to some extent. Yes, they're the 10th best in the league over the last 6, but that's not that far off the Leicester defence. And then Salah against Newcastle. Newcastle have actually been the 3rd best defence in the league over the last 6. So that's the only one that stands out there as being a very tricky fixture from an attacking perspective, at least. If we're looking at over the last 6, again, quite a small sample size, but I do like to try and pay attention to these subtle changes across the sort of final few game weeks of the season. So Son and Kane's data isn't that exceptional. It's not the best on this list by any means. It's actually around sort of middle range of these 10 options. The defensive data for Leicester's bad, but not terrible. So putting that together, no, I don't think Son and Kane are absolutely essential. And no, I don't think they're the only captaincy options on this list. And yes, like I said, the fixture is slightly trickier for Salah. But when we look at minutes per expected goal involvement, Salah is the only one below 100 minutes. He's at 83.2 minutes. And he's got by far and away the best non-penalty expected goals per 90. This is actually 0.92. Right, that's incredible. That's incredible data. I should say, by the way, complete mistake on the graphic here. This is non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90. I do apologise. So 0.92 for Salah is absolutely exceptional. By far and away puts him as the best on this list here. So despite the fact that it's a slightly trickier fixture, despite the fact that Salah hasn't been finishing the amount of chances he did in the start of the season, you probably can't go wrong with captaining the Egyptian king once again. And I do think he's a fantastic option. And if you don't own Son and Kane, or you potentially want to back against the Spurs boys, because, again, I don't think Spurs have registered a shot on target in their last 2 matches, or maybe they've registered 1. They've been really struggling. I do think you could do worse than Salah, of course. So I think Salah's a fantastic option. Putting this all together, as you can see, despite what I just said, I do still think that if I owned Kane and Son, they would have my armband. I don't, so it's difficult to say 100%. I'm fairly confident if I owned Kane, he'd have my armband. If I owned both, I would still back the player that has penalties, considering how close Son and Kane's data is. So for me, if I had to say the best captaincy option for this week, it probably still is Kane for me, closely followed by Son. I do still think you could do worse than Salah, and the data would suggest that Salah's potentially the better option if you remove the fixture, but of course fixture is important, and Newcastle have been fairly good defensively recently, and it is at home for Newcastle, so I think there are maybe better options than Salah this week. If you're not looking at those 3 premiums in Kane, Salah, and Son, I think you're probably looking at the two Manchester City boys on this list here, Cancelo and De Bruyne. And then if you want to take a big risk, maybe Sterling and Foden. After that, I think you've maybe got Saka if he's confirmed fit, and then the Chelsea boys just due to risk of rotation. Then probably Coutinho. And I've got Mount 10th here just because across the season and also across the last 6, Havertz and Werner have better underlying data. So if you're going to back a Chelsea boy and you think they're equally likely to start, I would probably back Havertz and Werner. So that is my opinion on all of it. Like I said, I would probably captain Kane if I own him. I don't currently. So for me, it's probably a straight shootout between Cancelo, Salah, and Sterling. I'll discuss who I'm currently planning on captaining on Friday in my team selection video. But like I said, at the moment, the armband's on Cancelo. Let me know down below who you are currently planning on captaining. Always interested to hear your thoughts on the armband down below. So guys, the final thing to look at is Reece James. There was so many, and I'm talking 15 to 20 questions around Reece James, what to do with him. Unfortunately, I can't answer this question because I have to record this on Tuesday night, ready for Wednesday morning. I've got absolutely no idea whether Reece James is going to be fit or not. The obvious advice is wait for Tuchel's press conference, wait to hear what happens. And also, if he plays against Manchester United, then you know he's fit. What I wanted to just discuss, though, is Reece James across the season versus the last 6 and what impact we think the centre-back issue might have on him and whether we expect him to continue at that. The first thing to note is, yes, Chelsea's fixtures are amazing. And I think if Reece James is fit, I don't see any pressing issue to sell him. No, I don't think it's worth selling him for Robertson. No, I don't think it's even worth selling him for a City defender. Yes, I think we'll see rotation in that Leeds game, which is annoying because otherwise that's a fantastic double for Chelsea. I don't think Reece James, Alonso, Havertz, Werner or Mount will start that Leeds game. Potentially one of them might, but trying to predict who that is very tough just because it's a few days before the FA Cup final. So if Reece James is fit, I don't think you should sell him. But what I thought, like I said, I'd do is look across the entire season, look across the last 6. What's worth noting is that these last 6 fixtures for Reece James do not cover any fixtures where he's played centre-back. So the last games that he's played centre-back was, of course, in the FA Cup semi-final and the Champions League. So this is not taken into account the issue at centre-back, which might even reduce his numbers even further. And the other thing to note for Reece James is that the last 6 matches actually span as far as game week 19. So game week 19 was the 6th fixture. So the last 6 isn't a particularly short sample size with respect to the time period that we're looking at. So hopefully that makes sense, but I thought it would still be interesting to look at how heavily skewed Reece James' data is by those first few game weeks where he absolutely smashed it earlier on in the season. So total minutes played, 1,337 across the season, only 339 across the last 6. So again, as we spoke about with Nketiah at the start, 339 minutes is a very small sample size, but you can still look a little bit across this. You can still draw a few trends, but not too many. Expected FPL points across the season, 7.4. Very, very good. Puts him as one of the best defenders in the league across the season. Only 5.33 across the last 6. That is still fairly good, but that is a notable drop-off of around 2 expected FPL points. Non-penalty expected goals plus expected assists per 90. Again, across the entire season at 0.39 for Reece James, whereas it's 0.24 across the last 6. So again, even taking into account, even again, removing the fact that he might play centre-back, across the last 6, removing those first few fixtures where he absolutely smashed it and accumulated above 1 expected goal involvement per 90, his underlying data has been good but not great. This puts him similar along the lines of Robertson, along the lines of Cancelo. And this would suggest that he's an incredible defender with really good attacking output, but not maybe as good as the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold, who consistently puts up numbers as good as Reece James has across the season. Big chances per 90 across the season, putting at 0.2, which is a big chance every 5 games, assuming he plays 90 minutes in each of those. Big chances over the last 6, he hasn't had any big chances. Once again, even taking out of the account the fact that he might play centre-back, even at right wing-back, he hasn't been that attacking across the last 6 fixtures. Touches in the box per 90, 3.16 across the season, 2.12 across the last 6. So Reece James has incredible data. Reece James is a fantastic option. Like I said, if you own Reece James and he is fully fit, I would probably look at keeping Reece James. In my personal opinion, though, his numbers look like they're dropping off slightly, and it looks like he might not be able to maintain those upper echelons that we thought he might at the start of the season. And this just suggests that he's not quite as good as the likes of Trent across the season if we're looking for consistency. And he's more in line with the likes of Cancelo and Robertson. Considering he's 6.4 million, though, considering the fact that Chelsea have a good defence, and considering the fixtures, if he's cheaper than Cancelo and Robertson and he plays maybe 4 of the last 5, he's still a fantastic option. The only issue we've got is how many minutes is he going to play, due to the fact that he does have, obviously, that reoccurring issue with his hamstring, a few potential injuries as well. Tuchel's not going to want to injure him at the end of the season. He's going to want to save him for the FA Cup final. Putting all of that together, I think you could sell Reece James. I don't see any reason to, though. unless you maybe don't own a City defender or a Liverpool defender, and this is your only way to get them in, and there's no other way to get them into your team. Let me know down below, what are you currently planning on doing with Reece James? Are you just going to wait for the Manchester United game on Thursday, or are you just going to wait for Tuchel's press conference on Friday? I think that's the most sensible thing to do. Either way, don't rush him into your team. Don't rush him out of your team. Wait for that game. Wait for the press conference. Hopefully, we'll have better understanding of, number one, is he going to play centre-back or right wing-back over the last 5? And number two, most importantly, is he even fit? So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 35 preview video done and dusted. Only 4 game weeks left now. We really are at the business end of the season. Thank you so much for the support on the recent videos. They have absolutely blown up, and we've gained loads of subscribers. So if you're a new subscriber, thank you. If you're an old subscriber, thank you for continuing to watch. I really do appreciate it. If you did like this video, make sure to like and comment. And if you've not subscribed yet, please do make sure to subscribe as well. It's completely free for you to do, but it massively helps to support the channel. And if you want to go above and beyond and help support the channel, please do give Ultimate Champions a go. Link is in the description. And also consider becoming either a YouTube member or a patron as well. Both of those links will be in the description too. You can get some personalized team feedback and also join our private Discord channel too. Until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.